3 people were injured on a busy Black Friday.
I got my dog! I got my dog!
It wasn't always like this, but something happened in 1983, and we were never going back.
The intensity of this search for these dolls.
A full-grown woman taking a doll out of a child's hand?
They trampled everybody.
The way in which people reacted in stores, this was new.
What do we tell our little girl Christmas morning? What are we supposed to say? You've been good, but Santa ran short?
This is a story about the worst parts of capitalism.
This nice lady created these dolls. And then this guy comes along and he steals the idea.
I don't know whether it's true or not true.
Cabbage Patch Kids are original to Xavier.
I used to think that it was illegal to talk about this when I was little.
Anybody tells you, oh yeah, we knew this was gonna happen, you institutionalize them.
I don't think there were any winners. The winner was money.
Is this an advertiser's dream come true or a nightmare?
I was scared to death.
That was the trailer for the feature documentary Billion Dollar Babies, the true story of the Cabbage Patch Kids. And this is Factual America. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood. Each week I watch a hit documentary and then talk to the filmmakers and their subjects. Cabbage Patch Kids were the 1980s toy craze that started it all. This unlikeliest of fads introduced America, and ultimately the world, to Black Friday and all the trappings that we've all come to expect. Riots, scuffles, and mayhem, just to grab that last must-have item on the shelf on the day after Thanksgiving. Joining us to discuss the film is Dan Goodman, producer and co-founder of Believe Entertainment. We have a lot of fun talking about the phenomenon that was Cabbage Patch Kids. Connie Chung and Neil Patrick Harris also get a mention. You won't want to miss this. Stay tuned. Dan Goodman, welcome to Factual America. How are things with you?
Everything's great. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We're talking about Billion Dollar Babies, the true story of the Cabbage Patch Kids.
Yes,
I guess it premiered at Tribeca last year.
Premiered at Tribeca Film Festival last year. Yep, exactly right.
And now a limited theatrical release in the USA and Canada on November 24th, known as Black Friday to some of us and some of our listeners. Indeed, so welcome. Great to have you on. Is it any chance of people being able to see it elsewhere? Is that still being worked out?
That's being worked on, but we definitely have plans to expand that distribution after this first theatrical window for sure. So we will keep people up to speed with all the latest info. Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good.
It will be much more widely available, for sure.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
So most of our listeners and viewers will not have had a chance to see this yet, and most likely. So maybe you can start us off. Tell us what is Billion Dollar Babies really all about? Give us a synopsis.
Yeah. Well, the Billion Dollar Babies is the story of the Cabbage Patch Kids, and really kind of digging into its origins. Some of which you might know about, and I think what you'll find from watching the film is there's a lot you didn't know about. Right. But Cabbage Patch Kids was such a major, iconic brand in the early 80s. It was one of those defining brands, and recently, as of, a week or two ago, just got inducted into the Toy Hall of Fame. Finally, after many years of petitioning and applying. So it's just, it's one of those things. It's just, it's been in the zeitgeist. This is the 40th year of its release. 1983 was really when it came to market. It hit with a bang, literally and figuratively, because it created toy craze hysteria.
Right.
really unlike anything ever. There were a lot of toy fads before, but this was really one of the first times that toy shopping turned violent. Where people had to they're coming out of stores in ambulances. So the documentary is really, it's one part pop culture, and it's one part kind of exploring like what was happening, to us as a society at the time that created this perfect storm, and what's happened since, what has it spawned, and what is it left in its wake, kind of thing.
Yeah, so, I mean, believe it or not, I won't speak for you, I'll speak for myself. A lot of our listeners will have not maybe even been born when this thing happened, so
I was.
I definitely was.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah,
I'm very cognizant of what was going on. I mean, to put it bluntly, my wife was even saying, I think I was already too old for that by that point.
Yeah.
So, but they were kind of an unlikely candidate.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know there was a Toy Hall of Fame, but you wouldn't have thought they would be in the Toy Hall of Fame when they got. So maybe you can describe what these things are and why they became such a hit.
Well, you bring up such a good point, because they are kind of an unlikely phenomenon as a brand, as a toy, because they're sort of these potato-faced looking, like, they're not Barbies. They're not like the, most like cute, beautiful, whatever dolls. They're kind of like, a little awkward and weird looking, and they're sort of chubby, and they've got, but they don't do anything. They didn't have electronics. They didn't take batteries. But, what we kind of delve into is a lot of the different things that made these dolls, and I'm sorry, we're not supposed to call them dolls. We're supposed to call them babies or kids. They are not DOLLS, as we learned. But the things that made these kids so relatable was partly because they did look kind of homely and unauthentic. Like they weren't. Very authentic. They weren't like models or Barbies or whatever. They kids felt like they looked like them. Yeah. And this was really one of the first mass customization, products on the market. Coleco leveraged a lot of the technology to be able to create all these, kind of micro variations of the thing. So different skin color, different eye color, different hair color, different, one's got dimples, one doesn't, one's got freckles, one does, and it's millions of combinations. So the uniqueness of each of these dolls became, something that these kids could relate to. And then, you adopted them. Yeah. And that was a whole nother thing of little boys and little girls becoming little parents. That was something very new. And the fact that they marketed it to young boys as well as girls was also very new. So there were just a lot of things that really related to the kids in a pretty significant way that made them, a really interesting, though I'm with you, unlikely, product.
Yeah, and that's, my view is, obviously my judgment is based purely on sort of appearances, but like it said, as you've just said, they're well ahead of their time in terms of marketing of it. Being able to mass produce something yet make everyone think they've got something that's a unique doll. It's extremely diverse. They're not all blonde-haired and blue-eyed and all these things. And so it spoke to a really wide market. And then at the same time, as you said, you used the Z word. I was going to use myself, actually. But you set the scene. So this is happening. This guy, and we'll talk a little bit more about Xavier Roberts and others in a few minutes. But this guy comes up with this idea for this, I'll say doll. No one's told me not to.
We can say dolls. Nobody's going to. They're not going to come after us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. We don't want the Cabbage Patch police coming after us. But what was going on in America at this time that kind of became this sort of I don't know, the pot that this could kind of grow in and become a craze?
Well, it's very interesting because the roots of it were not just what was happening in that moment, but from a consumerism perspective, we examine what had led up to that moment and what had happened in the past. And, you know, I think one of the things we uncovered that was so fascinating is you start with parents who were kids, you know, growing up at a time when they're coming out of the Great Depression, and, you know, they just didn't have a lot. Their parents couldn't do so many things for them.
Right.
So as they became parents and coming into, you know, the late 70s, early 80s, you've got this, you know, kind of maternal instinct to want to do for your kids, and it's normal, right? You want to do for your kids things that you couldn't have yourself. You want to improve that generation. So on the one hand, you have this kind of, you know, beginnings that started really a while ago. You're talking about, you know, the parents' childhoods. And now coming out of a recession in the late 70s into, you know, really kind of better economic times in the 80s, plus the credit card is becoming adopted. So you start spending and it's sort of casino style. You don't really know what you're spending for the holidays.
Right.
And, you know, so this combination of parents really wanting to do for them, it's easy to buy, money's coming up a little bit more readily available, and it's, you know, the beginning of the 80s, which is, you know, maybe one of the most materialistic times in, you know, the last century.
Yeah, they didn't call it the go-go 80s for nothing.
That's right.
So you're, as you say, it's more than just billion-dollar babies. It's the you know, it's the true story of the Cabbage Patch Kids. So you capture the whole story. You track down Xavier Roberts, which I gather wasn't an easy thing to do.
It was not.
Is that right?
It was not. Yep.
But then he makes quite an appearance. I mean, he's on for quite a.
He was amazing. I mean, he'd never really done an interview of this substance before. Most of what he'd done in the past had been, you know, TV style interviews or responding to a particular, you know, lawsuit they were in with Garbage Pail Kids or whatever, whatever it was. He'd never really done anything extensive like that. And frankly, he just really hadn't done anything for 20 plus years. And he became a little bit, you know, he's just kind of a private person, and he just sort of came back, you know, sort of in the background. And so tracking him down was really tough. Our director, Andrew Jenks, was, you know, reaching out to old high school friends. We heard whispers that he was in the south of France. You know, it's like, it was wild, you know. I mean, it took months just to find a way to get in contact with him. And then, you know, we got in contact with Della Tolhurst, who is a really wonderful woman who was his president of OAA, which is Original Appalachian Artworks.
Yeah.
That was the company that Xavier owned that started all of this. And Della was able to, you know, kind of get to know us and then encourage him to participate. And it was just, you know, we sat with him for 3 hours, I think it was. I mean, everything was on the table. We talked about everything. He was an open book. And I really give him a lot of credit. Was a terrific conversation. And I thought completely fascinating, especially because all I knew of him was his signature on the rear end of the dolls up until that point, right?
Exactly.
My sister has had all these Cabbage Patch Kids with, you know, with this guy who signed the rear end of the dolls. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Why did he sign all the...
It's a bit strange.
Yeah. But he answers that question too in the documentary.
Yeah.
So you have to check it out.
I mean, you got toy exec extraordinaire Alfred Kahn, who, look him up, Google him. He's name any toy of the last few decades, and he's somehow been involved. Yeah. You document who knew the dog eat dog world of Appalachian craft fairs,
right?
Lawsuits, riots at shopping malls and big stores. Amazing. That footage of the guy. So you have the one guy who describes being at that store.
Yeah.
And then you've actually got the footage of the guy with the baseball bat. I mean,
Alan was there. Yeah. So, you know, we got lucky. I mean, we had a number of archive producers that worked on the project. You know, we were able, and I think fortunate, to find a bunch of really great stuff. that was out there. But yeah, the store manager was, fearful for his life, and he stands up on the counter with an aluminum baseball bat, trying to threaten these people to back up and calm down, which I'm not sure standing up at the time with an aluminum baseball bat's going to get anybody to calm down, but he was freaking out.
And in spoiler alert, I mean, at the same time, they're throwing beanie.
He's like, you know what? Forget it. They just started chucking the boxes into the crowd. He's like, get out of my store here. I don't even think anybody paid for them. He just started giving them away and throwing them over the counter. The police officers in there, the guard, they're throwing them to people. Pandemonium.
So if I may say, it is pandemonium. I mean, give listeners and viewers a feel. I mean, imagine it has the look and feel of a John Hughes film, really. I mean, it is that.
Well, I'll take that as a very high compliment. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I mean, and it's not just the hairdos and everything. I mean, but what is it about? I mean, any idea of what is it about the 80s and 90s? We have these crazes and manias. I'm thinking of some other films that have come out. Pez Outlaw, Pepsi, Where's My Jet? These sort of things. It seems like a very different era. I think someone who's commented at Tribeca said it's like this sweet spot of innocent entrepreneurism and greed. But well,
it's kind of it's kind of American. It's capitalism, and it's really I think something that filmmakers have looked at for a long time is consumerism and capitalism, and what makes a great entrepreneur versus what makes somebody greedy. That line is very thin between those two things, and also there's just really kind of I think innocence of a lot of these products that people as people know them, that really had some struggles or really had some very detailed backstories that are way more complicated than it seemed just to people out front. So I personally find it fascinating. I think it speaks volumes about us as a society and what we find as a priority, because you think about these Cabbage Patch Kid riots and people going to hospitals, for trying to get these dolls. And it's not like we looked at that and thought, boy, that was a terrible idea. It's actually, time out. Like, let's take stock as a people.
Right.
Instead, we go the opposite direction. We go full bore into getting riot-worthy toys, and it just never stops. And that's kind of where we got to this, Black Friday kind of mentality of, to this day, people fighting over, Furbies and Tiffany Elmos and color television sets and flat screens and computers. And it's, it never stopped.
Yeah. To the point that I think we're even kind of shrugging it off these days. I mean, do they even run those stories anymore?
It's just really not shocking anymore, right? 6 people trampled last night at Kmart for going in. It's like, oh, that's too bad. But I bet they got great deals.
Exactly. I wish I'd been there.
I know. It's sad. It's really kind of sad.
Yeah. I think we're going to give our listeners and viewers a quick break. So we'll be right back with Dan Goodman, producer of $1 Billion Babies and a host of films. And you're also co-founder of the Academy and Emmy-winning studio Believe Entertainment. So again, $1 Billion Babies, theatrical release on November 24th, Black Friday. You're listening to Factual America. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or X to keep up to date with new releases or upcoming shows. Check out the show notes to learn more about the program, our guests, and the team behind the production. Now back to Factual America. Welcome back to Factual America. We're here with Dan Goodman, the producer of $1 Billion Babies. We've just been talking about Cabbage Patch Kids and the craze that they were, and they were the
as
precursor.
One does.
Yes, that's what we do here. So maybe you how did you and Believe Entertainment become involved with this project? Was it your idea, or when did you become involved?
Yeah, it started with Believe, with me and my business partners, which a lot of our stuff does, as we're always, we're a studio, so we're always looking for ideas. And I remember one day driving, I don't know where I was, somewhere, and seeing a billboard for Black Friday sales, and it was kind of early in the season, and I'm thinking, oh my God, here we go. And it was it was really the first Black Friday coming out of COVID. It was the first time people were going to be allowed back into physical stores for holiday shopping.
Right.
And I saw this Black Friday ad and thinking to myself, not only is it earlier than normal because they're trying to get people back into stores, but man, we've been cooped up for the last, 2+ years.
Right.
And they're going to let people loose inside retail stores. They're going to lose their minds. People are going to go crazy. And I'm thinking, it's like, this is, people are going to die.
Right.
And so we just started having this conversation. I was like, remember Cabbage Patch Kids? Remember how nuts people went for Cabbage Patch Kids and started, killing each other to try to, beating each other up to try to get these dolls? And we just started doing a little research because it was interesting to us. And, what we found was there were a lot of toy fads before that were kind of nuts. Like in 1977, there were Star Wars toys that were so popular that I think it was Kenner that was making them at the time.
Right.
They couldn't keep up with demand. They started selling empty boxes. So you would go to like Toys R Us, you would buy the box, you would keep the receipt, and they would you'd take down your info and they'd mail you a bag of, the toys.
Right.
Like 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there were some, there were crazy things going on, but nobody leaving in ambulances. And I think that's where it really piqued our interest and we saw something bigger than just a nostalgia story. We saw a much larger story of kind of evolution of social behavior and, and what and how we prioritize things as a society. So we started looking into that even further. We were very fortunate to partner with NBC Universal's syndication studios to co-produce with us, which is how we got to Connie Chung.
I was going to ask.
She's so great.
Yeah.
She's so great. I mean, she is such a character, lively, smart, fun. She is just, I cannot say enough great things about Connie. She's terrific.
I mean, for those of you who don't know, she's an 80s and 90s news icon. I mean, there was no bigger name in news really at the time. I mean, there were big names, but she was right up there. She was right up there. Yeah. And she did this interview on the Today Show on NBC that she calls a 5-minute commercial. Yeah.
One of my favorite lines or stories that she recounts in the doc is she says, giving away 5 minutes on the Today Show this is so valuable. The airtime is just so valuable. And she says, if we had a Middle East world leader on the show, would we have given that person 5 minutes? She says, I can't say that we would have.
Yeah.
So it just, you really get a sense of how big this thing was.
And
it
at a
was
time,
great. It just puts it in perspective.
Yeah, and at a time before the internet, and so it was even
that's right.
Network TV, Madison Avenue rates. I don't know what they would have been, but that was the only game in town.
Precious airtime.
Precious airtime, and this gets back to this whole mentality that your film also talks on. You tell people there's a shortage, that makes them even want it more.
Right. Well, they
even pull the advertising. I mean, and it still people. It didn't stop anyone.
Well, there was a claim filed by the New York State against Coleco, accusing them of harassing children. This is real. This happened. Accusing them of harassing children because you cannot advertise a product that you cannot buy. And they were not in stores, so they pulled the ads. And like you said, they made this big announcement. We're pulling the ads. We're not doing anything. And of course, it just created more craziness around the product thereafter. But I mean, this is where the reality is way stranger than fiction. You couldn't make that up about harassing children. I think it is just an amazing commentary on what was happening at the time.
Yeah, and the U.S. is not a litigious country, but I mean, it's like, but I should just stress to those who haven't seen. I mean, it is true. I mean, you're not exaggerating. They are riots. There are riots happening at these stores. You have it documented. There are people being hurt. I mean, not that we want to revel in that, but it is. I mean, it is happening, and it's kind of like other things. We had a guest on one time who, similar thing. Oh, you're from Jersey, Class Action Park.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, of course. Yes.
And I said, well, I couldn't help but laugh at some of these stories. He goes, well, that's just human nature because it is. You don't know what else to do.
You don't know what else to do.
But it is true. But I mean, besides Connie Chung, I mean, you also. How did you get Neil Patrick Harris to narrate this?
Yeah, Neil. So Neil Patrick Harris, he's terrific, and we really wanted somebody who, first of all, felt like he, or she belonged in the time. Obviously, a very iconic, character from the 80s, and somebody who lived it, who experienced it, who knew it firsthand. So it was really important to us, that authenticity of having somebody involved like that. And then Neil's, his talent, one of his great talents is just the ability to, deliver his lines with just the right twinge of subversiveness that is so perfect for what we were trying to do. He's just mastered that art, and he's so great at it because, let's face it, it's Cabbage Patch Kids, right? You can't, I mean, you can't take it too seriously, but there are serious things and interesting things that happen. So we just reached out to his team. We happened to be at the same talent agency, and we just reached out to his folks. I wish I could say there was more to it, but he just sparked to the idea, and was like, yeah, I'll do it. That sounds great. And he was just a real pleasure to work with. Again, I can't say enough nice things about him.
Yeah, I realize we don't have that much time left together, but I do want to ask you a few more questions if
Sure.
I may.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you're, Believe Entertainment, you co-founded it. I mean, it even says on your website, talks about the ever-changing distribution landscape.
Yeah.
You released this in 2022. You're now getting it out now. What does that say about distribution and where we are right now?
It's a great point because on the one hand, there's so many amazing new ways to distribute content and get it out there. And then in a lot of ways, it's, just as challenging as it's ever been. I think right now there's a lot of change going through the business, obviously with, the strikes that have just recently ended, is a big part of just kind of taking stock in the new distribution landscape. A big part of that had to do with, the success of shows. When they go on a streaming platform, it's really hard to determine the success of those shows. There's no real, residual formula like there is for hit movies or TV shows, kind of where everybody, participates in the success. So I think the industry is going through a real evaluation process of what that landscape looks like going forward. We kind of started our business in early days, of digital distribution,
right?
Specifically because this is before, any of the SVOD streamers or any of that stuff existed. So when we're talking about streaming, it was like partner with AOL and Yahoo, and really early days. I mean, we did one of the first shows on YouTube when YouTube told us they weren't going to do content. They were just a tech company, but if we want to figure it out and put our stuff up there, great. So I mean, it was early days, but the whole idea was finding a way to connect more directly with audiences, especially when you have great talent who kind of command their own audiences, and we still believe in that, and we still believe in that approach. So we're always trying to find, new ways of developing this stuff. And, the theatrical release for $1 Billion Babies is just going to be the first part of, what's going to be a multi-phase strategy of releasing this in market.
Okay. And I also, and as part of the connecting with the audience, is that sort of, I've noticed that you've really moved into podcasts as well. Is that part of that?
We have yeah. Again, we're an anomaly in that we just we kind of follow the things that we think are interesting. We really love the scripted podcast world. We just released a series about Alice Roosevelt, Theodore's oldest daughter, who was sort of the original rebel daughter,
right.
Smoking, driving in cars with boys, drinking, and this is 1900. And it's a great story. It's on Audible right now. It was our first kind of start in scripted podcasting and stuff. But yeah, I think we're trying to find ways of telling great stories in different venues and accessing a lot of different distribution means, to get the stuff out there.
Yeah. And is that a way, do you see it as a way to develop trial ideas that then you might bring to the big screen or the small screen, or do they stand on their own?
I think it's both. The scripted podcast stuff, it does require, it does require a pretty significant amount of work to do those things because they're really like old school radio shows. I think we had 85 speaking parts in this thing,
wow.
Including all the extras and what have you. Right. But so, we had a lot of voice actors, some great lead talent like Emma Roberts and Tony Goldwyn and Maggie Siff, Beza Dabu, and there's a lot of work involved in that. So you really can't do it only because you want it to be a TV show. It's like getting an MBA because you think it's going to look good on a resume. Well, yeah, it might look good on a resume and it'll probably help you with a job later, but it's a lot of work, to get an advanced degree, to get a master's degree, right? It's the same kind of thing. I think, we hope that it leads to other things. We think it's a great way to test stuff out, get to know the characters and really delve into their worlds. But it's also something that we love and we're very proud of in this form because it's a really fun, interesting way to create something. It leaves a lot to the imagination that you have to fill in by only listening and not being able to see something in front of you.
And if I'm doing my job, then I chain this back to Cabbage Patch Kids, which is all about people using their imagination.
That's right. Very well done.
Yeah, that's exactly. I know you've got to go, but and I've done my best, Connie Chung, in terms of giving you some 5 minutes for Believe Entertainment, I think. But
I think you have, which I appreciate.
But it's interesting because our audience is something I've seen with others, and I'm not going to ask the Golden Age documentary question, but it feels kind of like maybe that's kind of where we are with podcasts, isn't it? There's something. Everyone seems to have a podcast these days. There's loads of them, but there's not enough good ones, I would say. And so,
agreed.
It does seem like it's an interesting it's got an excitement to it, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's very accessible, unlike anything else. And to me, that's always been, I think, an interesting way of thinking about it because it's reaching people in, this sort of convenience world where they can bring it with them very easily, put on some headphones and listen to it, or they sit in the car and listen to something, or and you can listen to it in parts. So I think it's just become, because of the nature of our fractured, hurried lives, it's something that just works really well in everybody's schedule for a lot of ways. And then I think people have been very creative recently. I think there's a lot of real creativity, which is why I go back to this, it's a way to develop for other stuff and hopefully it goes places, but there's something kind of magical about it. There's something really, I think, inspiring to a lot of people. It's very accessible. It's very approachable. And I think it brings listeners very close to the people that they're listening to in a very intimate way that I don't think TV delivers. It's a very different experience, I think.
Okay. Well, one last thing, and then we'll sign off. What's next for you in Believe Entertainment? Anything you Anything like Dear Basketball in the works, or any,
yes, yes. Well, there are a number of documentaries in development, and there are 2 that will be coming out on Peacock, NBC's streaming channel. One in February and one next spring that we'll be announcing very soon.
Okay.
One in the music space, one in the sports space that we're real excited about, and we're just finishing production on.
Well, if we haven't scared you off, we'd love to have you on again to discuss
I would love
those.
it. That would be great. Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Dan. Just to remind our listeners and viewers, we've been talking with Dan Goodman, producer of $1 Billion Babies, and a host of other films, and he's also co-founder of the Academy and Emmy-winning studio Believe Entertainment Group. $1 Billion Babies, theatrical release on November 24th. What else are you doing on Black Friday? You don't need to go shopping.
That's right. Who needs to shop? Go see the movie.
Go to the theater, or it's probably the local theaters. Probably not too far from all the shopping venues anyway.
That's right.
So
that's right.
So make a point of checking it out, and I'm sure you'll find it fun and as enjoyable as I did. So thanks again, Dan. Thanks again for joining us on Factual America. A big shout out to everyone at Intersound Audio in York, England for their great studio and fine editing and production skills. A big thanks to Amy Ord, our podcast manager, who ensures we continue getting great guests onto the show and that everything otherwise runs smoothly. Finally, a big thanks to you, our listeners. Please keep sending us feedback and episode ideas, whether it is on YouTube, social media, or directly by email. And please also remember to like us and share us with your friends and family, wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. This is Factual America, signing off. You've been listening to Factual America. This podcast is produced by Alamo Pictures, which specializes in documentaries, television, and shorts about the U.S. for international audiences. Head on down to the show notes for more information about today's episode, our guests, and the team behind the podcast. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Be the first to hear about new productions, festivals showing our films, and to connect with our team. Our homepage is factualamerica.com.